everyone, and welcome to this month's Sea Change Community Conversation. I am Erin Conn, and I am the Community Engagement Manager for Sea Change. And with me today for this first part of this interview, I have Dr. Shirley Malcom with me, who is the Director of Sea Change. Shirley, would you care to say hi to everyone?
Thanks, Erin. Thank you.
You
It's good to
too.
see you.
So, in our conversation today, you and I are going to be talking about what we mean when we say that sea change supports systemic transformation of colleges and universities. Can you tell us, in your own words, what systemic transformation could be for an institution and why we must look at the system if we're hoping to make any positive change?
That's an easy one, Erin. You should know that about 30 years ago, we were working on a project to look at what colleges and universities were doing with regard to trying to diversify their STEM student population and STEM faculty populations. And what we found was something that had really become kind of iconic and that has driven us towards sea change. And that is that most of what was available and being offered were small projects. Program over here, this initiative over there. And they were largely based on the effort of some individual who saw it that there was not the diversity there that they felt needed to be, and so they wanted to do something. They and their friends might volunteer with the program, and so what you had is a lot of individual effort, but you didn't really have something that was sustainable. People get tired, people leave, people don't get credit for their work, and so they really have to turn around and start working on the things for which they do get credit. The other part of it is often that things got supported initially by soft money and grants and proposals that people had to write. And there was not the hard dollars of the university's budget that were going toward trying to support these things. And in many cases, they were totally not unaligned with each other. This person over here didn't know that that person over there in a different department was doing something that was similar. So it was a lot of little stuff. I think of it as points of light, but it was not in aligned in such a way that it could actually be a laser that could have the kind of impact that you wanted. In some cases, we can find more clustering where it isn't just a few little programs, but a kind of a policy initiative. And I'll give you an example. In in the late 1990s, of where the women faculty, women full professors at MIT, did a study and presented it to their dean within the sciences at that time that showed that there was kind of systematic um, disadvantage that these women had to overcome. They didn't have the same space, they had salary differentials, they had all of these things. And so once this was discovered, they were made whole. You could act on that. But it didn't necessarily change the policies or the programs within the College of Science. It moved things at that point, but some years later, once that dean had gone, and there you were again, similar kinds of things really cropping up again. I give you another example from Carnegie Mellon of where they did a fantastic job of studying the situation for women in computer science, and they published a really really great book, Unlocking the Clubhouse, looking at what they found out. And they found out there were problems with the way that they recruited their students, what they were looking for, what their expectations were for the people that they recruited. You know, knowing lots of programming languages, that wasn't necessarily a part of the me and that girls and young women were involved with. That was more kind of a guy nerdy thing. But that really wasn't necessary to bring women into computer science. Being good problem solvers was necessary, and it was an indicator of here you could get people and bring them in. And they combined this kind of the change in the way that they did selection with strong mentoring, with giving people the opportunity to start wherever they were to build these skills over time. And they did change, and they have changed. And that department now, that's been locked in because they have parity among the women who are going into the computer science program. And that is because they took a much more structural approach about who came in, what kinds of experiences they needed to provide, what kind of community did they need to build. And that has been retained over time because even though there was a faculty member who had a strong interest in all of these things, that became a kind of a sustaining part. The women from the senior women basically could support the junior women who could support the sophomore women. So you got these things to connect. The difficulty is that that didn't keep going. And I think that the notion of thinking of how do you incentivize a faculty member? How do you basically tell somebody that this is a good thing? You do it with recognition. You do it by attributing these particular aspects to their promotion and tenure package. And that's the kind of thing that does not happen, be it and has not happened in many of these cases, because that happens at a higher policy level. So you've got to think about how all of the structures within the entire institution actually will support or not the kinds of changes that we know need to happen in order to really diversify STEM and bringing in a more inclusive and welcoming environment.
And so this pyramid that you speak of, you helped develop this model in 1991, and it's something that we show to institutions when we begin engaging them in the very difficult work of sea change. So we're going to put this model up, and can you walk us through what each level of this pyramid means and what it could look like at an institution? And then we can talk more about why we really need to move to the top.
The lot of little projects that are going on down there is a result of people's personal commitment in many cases, and they have these things that they stand up, but they are often things that they're done on a volunteer basis, or they have to go out and get soft money. They have to get grants in order to raise the funds that are sufficient to operate these little programs. It may be just bringing people into their lab. It may be just providing summer programs. But then you have the kind of next level up where departments decide they want to make some change. And I think I've given an example. I think I've given you an example of that in the Carnegie Mellon decision that they wanted to bring more women into computer science, and that was that. While it was the effort of an individual, it became the work of a department to do the research, to look at the things that made people come or not, and then to really start to build the structures, the mentoring structures, the welcoming structures, the efforts to show role models, all those things, and then put them in place so that they could kind of continue to attract the next set of women and the next and the next. And in some cases, you have people who stand up centers. There's been NSF funding of centers that can coordinate things within an institution for in the past, and you get these kinds of things, and you do start to see maybe engineering collaborating with science or collaborating with the social and behavioral sciences to come together. But we've never seen that kind of top piece where all of the pieces are in fact coming together. and where there's hard dollars that are supporting this, where you do the things that support diversity, equity, inclusion as a part of your regular budget, not on top of the things that you are already doing, but instead of the things that you have been doing, putting the structures and the scaffold in place so that really diversity, equity, and inclusion are normative within the institution.
So, how is Sea Change helping point institutions in the direction where they'll be thinking about changing things from the top structurally to impact everyone throughout the institution?
The first thing is that you don't really realize this unless you see it, and you don't see it unless you look for it. And Sea Change provides a kind of a guidepost and scaffolding so that institutions begin to look at what they are and how they are structured and what the outcome of that happens to be. So this whole thing of awareness, being seeing the water, you talk about the fish doesn't see the water, is actually seeing it in the sense of what are the numbers, not just what are the numbers, but what does the climate feel like? What is it? Do we have welcoming? Do we have leaving? Do we have staying? Do we have whatever? And I think that that's a major piece for helping institutions understand that there may be nothing wrong with these interventions. It's just that they're not enough by themselves, that you've got to look at the programs, policies, practices, culture, everything, processes. Otherwise, you cannot make the kind of long-lasting and sustainable change that Sea Change is trying to support.
And we provide a very thorough scaffolding criteria and
Oh,
guidelines
yes.
for the
Oh,
awards
yes.
process to support
Because
that.
it is the scaffold, you've got to be able to understand all of the pieces that are interconnected. And they are all interconnected. I told you I was trained as an ecologist. I could recognize an ecosystem when I see one, and these pieces all reinforce each other. And if you don't go after the entire system, you will, in fact, you're not going to achieve your long-term goals.
Thank you so much for helping us understand what we mean by systemic transformation. It is a huge undertaking and something that is going to take us and the institutions we work with a lot of
You're
effort.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But one of the things that, that sometimes makes me a little bit um, depressed is when people say, but it takes so long. And what I want to say to them is, yes, but just think when you get to the end, you will have made a change that will be lasting. And the other thing that it is important, absolutely essential to remember, is that the institutions didn't get that way overnight, and they're not going to get they're not going to become different overnight. And we have to put in the hard work and build the community and get ownership of the entire institution. People have to own their problems.
So when we think about Sea Change members who are doing excellent work to address systemic issues on their campuses, who comes to mind for you?
Well, a lot of people come to mind because we have had some absolutely amazing people that we have been able to draw into the community. But one person I want that stands out in my mind right now is a person who's not a STEM person. Most of the other people are STEM people, but he's not a STEM person. But he gets it and he understands it absolutely, that it's not just going to affect the STEM fields. We may be among the worst offenders, but it's going to affect the entire institution. And that's Doug Haynes. And I am really thrilled to be able to connect with Doug and talk about what Sea Change actually looks like at the University of California, Irvine.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your conversation with him too. And that will be part two of this interview series. Shirley, thank you so much
Thank you,
for your time
Erin.
today. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.